The rain poured down in relentless waves, turning the quiet streets of Springwood into a blur of shimmering lights and wet pavement. A lone woman stood under a flickering street lamp, soaked to the bone, her expensive coat clinging to her frame. She wasn't just caught in the storm, she was running from something or someone. Inside Springwood Cafe, Ben Carter wiped down the counter, preparing to close for the night. But when he glanced out the window and saw her standing there, hesitating, lost, looking over her shoulder like she expected the darkness to swallow her whole, he knew. She wasn't just a traveler passing through. And when she finally stepped inside, drenched and weary, she had no idea that this small-town cafe, and the man standing behind the counter, would become her only safe haven. But what Ben didn't know? The woman he just invited in from the rain wasn't just any stranger. She was Emma Wright, the secret billionaire heiress, the woman who had walked away from a life of luxury, from power, from a man who wouldn't let her go. And now she was about to change his life forever. If you love stories about fate, second chances, and love that defies all odds, then this is one you don't want to miss. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Now sit back, get comfortable, because this story is just getting started. Struggling, single dad helps a woman in the rain, then learns. She's a secret billionaire on the run. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, drumming against the rooftop of Springwood Cafe, the only place still open at this late hour. Ben Carter, the cafe's owner, wiped down the counter, glancing at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Too late for customers, too early to close. Through the fogged-up window, a shadowy figure appeared under the street lamp. A woman, soaked to the bone, stood motionless, hugging her coat around herself as if trying to shield herself from the downpour. Ben hesitated for a moment, then sighed. His instincts as a former firefighter kicked in, the ones that never let him walk away when someone might be in trouble. He pushed open the door, the bell chiming softly. "You okay out here?" he called over the rain. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Even through the dim light he could tell she was not from around here. There was something refined about her. Her coat was expensive, her boots too pristine for someone wandering aimlessly in the rain. But at this moment, she looked completely out of place, lost, vulnerable, and desperately alone. Her voice caught in her throat. She shivered. Ben stepped aside, motioning inside. "Come on in. It's warm in here." She hesitated, but then nodded and hurried inside, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. Ben shut the door behind her, locking out the storm. The cafe was small but welcoming, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries still lingering in the air. Ben grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter and handed it to her. "Here, dry off." She accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you," her voice soft but controlled. She wasn't just cold, she was on edge. Her hands trembled slightly as she dabbed her face and pushed back damp strands of auburn hair. Ben studied her carefully, trying to piece together her story. She wasn't homeless. Her coat alone probably cost more than this month's rent. And she wasn't a local. "You lost?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "No, just passing through." It was a lie. He could hear it in the slight hesitation, the way her gaze darted away. But he let it slide. "Coffee?" he offered. She nodded. "Yes, please." Ben poured a fresh cup and set it in front of her, watching as she wrapped her fingers around the mug as if absorbing its warmth. "You got a name?" he asked. Another brief pause. Then, "Emma." "Emma," he repeated, rolling the name around in his mind. It suited her, elegant but understated. "Well, Emma, you picked a hell of a night to be passing through." She let out a short, breathy laugh. "Yeah, seems that way." Ben had seen enough people in distress to recognize the signs. Emma Wright, if that was even her real name, wasn't just escaping the rain. She was running from something or someone. Her coat was expensive, but her eyes carried exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from a simple road trip. The way she kept glancing at the door, the flickering uncertainty in her gaze, it was the look of someone who wasn't sure if she was safe yet. Ben didn't pry. He had learned long ago that people would talk when they were ready, or they wouldn't. Either way, pushing never helped. Instead, he leaned against the counter and sipped his own coffee. "You staying in town?" She shook her head. "No, She hesitated. "I just need to figure out my next stop." Ben nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense, even though it didn't. "Got a place to stay?" "I'll find something." That answer irritated him for reasons he couldn't explain. He didn't like the idea of her wandering into the night with no plan. "The motel down the street is decent. Not fancy, but clean." She looked up, something like gratitude flashing across her face. "Thanks, I'll check it out." But she didn't move. She just sat there staring into her coffee, fingers tightening around the cup. Ben knew that feeling. The hesitation before stepping back into the unknown. "I can give you a ride," he offered casually. Emma's eyes snapped up, guarded. "No, that's okay." "Suit yourself." He reached under the counter and pulled out a freshly baked muffin, setting it on a napkin in front of her. "On the house." She stared at it for a long moment before finally picking it up, breaking off. A piece. Ben watched as some of the tension drained from her shoulders. Sometimes kindness wasn't about big gestures or fixing everything. Sometimes it was just about giving someone a warm drink, a moment to breathe, and a reminder that they weren't alone in the world. And maybe that's all she needed. For now. As Ben wiped down the counter, the cafe's door suddenly swung open, the wind howling as a man in a black suit stepped inside. His eyes immediately scanned the room, sharp and searching. Emma went rigid. Ben noticed it instantly. The man's gaze landed on her and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Emma," he said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend. "There. You are?" Ben didn't move, but every instinct in his body went on high alert. Emma's hand clenched around the coffee cup, and for the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. The moment the man in the black suit stepped inside Springwood Cafe, the air changed. It wasn't just Emma's reaction, though her fingers tightened around the coffee cup and her breath caught in her throat. It was the man himself. He didn't belong here. His sharp suit, the expensive leather shoes still gleaming despite the rain, the way he moved with calculated confidence. He carried an aura that contrasted starkly with the warmth of the little cafe. Ben didn't move from behind the counter, but his entire body tensed. He had spent years as a firefighter, walking into dangerous situations without hesitation. He recognized tension when he saw it, and right now, Emma looked like a trapped animal, her eyes darting toward the door, calculating escape routes. The man smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that held power. "Emma," he said again, this time softer, smoother. Too smooth. Ben's jaw tightened. She still didn't respond. Her hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. The man sighed and adjusted his cufflinks. "You've had your fun. It's time to go." Ben didn't like the way he said that, as if Emma were a runaway child instead of a grown woman. Emma's voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Carter." Ben blinked. Carter? The irony wasn't lost on him. His last name was Carter, too. But there was no relation between him and this man. That much was obvious. Carter's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "You don't get to decide that." That was it. Ben set his coffee mug down a little too hard on the counter. "Funny," he said, his voice even. "I was just thinking she does." Carter finally acknowledged him, turning slightly as if just now realizing Ben was in the room. "And you are?" "Ben Carter." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Carter let out a quiet chuckle. Carter? He glanced at Emma. That's cute. Emma's hands curled tighter around the ceramic mug, but she said nothing. Ben leaned against the counter, casual, but his eyes never left the man in the suit. I run this place, he said simply. And from what I can see, the lady doesn't want to go with you. Carter smiled, but there was an edge of something sharp behind it. This isn't your concern, Ben shrugged. She's in my cafe, drinking my coffee, sitting in my seat. Sounds like my concern. Silence. For a moment, Carter just studied. Him, calculating, measuring. Then he exhaled and stepped back, raising his hands slightly in mock surrender. All right, he said smoothly. If this is what you want, Emma. But the way he said it wasn't defeat. It was a warning. He turned and strolled back toward the door, adjusting his coat. Before he stepped outside, he glanced back one last time. This little game of yours won't last, he told her. You and I both know it. And then he was gone, disappearing into the rain. The cafe was silent for several moments after the door swung shut. The only sound was the faint dripping of water from Emma's rain-soaked coat onto the wooden floor. Ben waited, giving her time. He had seen that look before, the way her shoulders trembled slightly, not from cold but from adrenaline wearing off. Emma, he said finally, keeping his voice calm. You want to tell me what that was about? She shook her head immediately. I can't, Ben frowned. Can't or won't? She let out a shaky breath and set her coffee down. Both. That didn't sit well with him. Not after the way she had practically shrunk into herself the second that guy walked in. Who is he? Ben pressed. Emma ran a hand through her damp hair, her fingers trembling slightly. Someone I used to know. Ben raised an eyebrow. That wasn't someone who just used to know you. That was someone who thinks he owns you. Emma flinched but didn't argue. Ben sighed and rubbed his jaw. This was not his problem. He barely knew this woman. She was a stranger, and whatever mess she was in wasn't his to clean up. But damn it, he couldn't ignore it either. He knew what fear looked like. And right now, Emma was drowning in it. All right, he said, exhaling. Do you have somewhere to go? She hesitated. Too long. Ben cursed under his breath. You don't, do you? Emma pressed her lips together but didn't answer. Ben pinched the bridge of his nose. What the hell was he doing? He barely knew her. This wasn't his fight, but still, the words came out before he could stop them. I have an extra room above. The cafe. Emma's head snapped up. Ben, It's nothing fancy, he cut in, but it's warm, and there's a lock on the door. Her expression crumpled just for a second, like she wasn't used to people offering help without expecting something in return. Ben exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, you don't have to say yes, but it's late, and I don't like the idea of you wandering around when that guy is out there. Emma swallowed hard. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, finally, softly, okay. Ben led her upstairs to the small apartment above the cafe. It was simple. Just a kitchen, a couch, and a bedroom that hadn't been used in years. It's not much, he said, flipping on the light. Emma stepped inside cautiously, her fingers tracing the edges of the wooden table. It's perfect, she whispered. Ben lingered in the doorway. There's food in the fridge, and, there's an old sweatshirt of mine in the closet if you need something dry. Emma nodded, but she didn't meet his eyes. Ben hesitated before turning to leave. Ben? He stopped, looking back. For the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. Not just scared, but exhausted in a way that went deeper than the rain. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben nodded. Get some rest. He shut the door behind him, exhaling as he leaned against the wall. What the hell was he getting himself into? The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled Springwood Cafe as the morning sun streamed through the large windows. The town had finally dried after last night's downpour, but the storm had left its mark. not just on the soaked sidewalks, but inside the small apartment above the cafe. Ben stood behind the counter, wiping down mugs and trying not to think about the woman sleeping upstairs. It wasn't just that Emma was a stranger. It was the way she carried her silence, the way she reacted to Carter, the man in the suit who had walked in last night like he owned her. Ben had been in enough dangerous situations to know when someone wasn't safe. And Emma? She was running. The question was, from what? The bell above the cafe door chimed. Ben glanced up, expecting a customer, but instead Emma stood there, looking out of place yet oddly at home. She had changed into the sweatshirt Ben had left for her, the sleeves too, long on her slender frame. Her auburn hair, still slightly damp, cascaded over her shoulders. And for the first time she looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Ben gestured toward the nearest table. "You might as well sit. You're already here." Emma let out a breath, half relief, half exhaustion, and slid into the seat closest to the counter. Ben grabbed a mug, filled it with hot coffee, and set it in front of her without asking. Emma stared at it. You look like you need it," Ben said, cutting off whatever polite protest she had. Emma's lips twitched, but it wasn't quite a smile. "Thanks," she murmured, wrapping her hands around the warmth of the cup. Ben didn't say anything, not yet. He just watched as she took her first sip, her shoulders visibly relaxing as the heat traveled through her. It wasn't much, but sometimes small comforts mattered the most. "So," Ben said, leaning against the counter, "are we going to talk about last night?" Emma stiffened. Ben expected that. He had pushed enough people out of burning buildings to know when someone wanted to disappear. "I appreciate the place to stay," she said carefully. "But I don't want to cause trouble for you." Ben arched an eyebrow. "Trouble's already here." Emma flinched. "I mean it," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. "Carter, he's not someone you want to get involved with." Ben let out a slow breath. "Yeah? Well, here's the thing. He walked into my cafe like he owned the place." "I don't like that." Emma stared down at her coffee, her fingers gripping the mug just a little too tight. Ben sighed. "Look, I'm not asking for your life story, but if there's a chance that guy's coming back, I'd rather know what I'm dealing with." Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, "He's my fiancé." Ben blinked. "Was," Emma corrected quickly. "Was my fiancé." Ben folded his arms. "That guy?" Emma nodded, her expression unreadable. Ben resisted the urge to curse out loud. That explained a lot. The way Carter talked to her, looked at her, tried to control her. It wasn't just some ex-boyfriend situation. It was ownership. Ben exhaled. "You ran." Emma's gaze lifted, meeting his for the first time. "Yeah," she admitted. And in that moment, Ben saw something he hadn't before. Not just fear, not just exhaustion, but a woman who had fought to break free. Ben ran a hand through his hair, thinking. Emma wasn't just passing through town. She had nowhere else to go. And that meant Carter wasn't done chasing her. Ben didn't like that. Not one bit. "Does he know where you are?" Emma shook her head. "No. At least, I don't think so. He must have been looking for me everywhere. Last night, I don't know how he found me." Ben frowned. "You have a phone?" Emma hesitated before shaking her head. "I got rid of it before I left." Ben stared at her, then exhaled. "Smart move. No credit cards, no digital trail. We had planned this," which meant she knew exactly what she was running from. Ben leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "So what now?" Emma let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I wish I knew." Ben considered his options. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy trying to keep his cafe running and raise his kid. But he had a rule. He didn't turn his back on people who needed help. And Emma, she needed help. "You can stay here a little longer," he said. Emma's head snapped up. Ben, I can't. You don't have anywhere else to go, he interrupted. And I'm not about to let some guy in a fancy suit chase you back into whatever you ran from. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. And for the first time since she walked in, her eyes softened, like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Ben pushed off the counter. But if you're staying, you have to pull your weight. Emma raised an eyebrow. Pull my weight? He gestured to the cafe. I could use an extra set of hands. You any good with customers? Emma huffed out a small laugh. You're offering me a job? Ben shrugged. I'm offering you something to do other than look over your shoulder. Emma hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Ben smirked. Good. Aprons are in the back. And just like that, the woman who had walked in from the rain became part of his world. The hum of Springwood Cafe in the morning was something Ben Carter had grown used to over the years. The rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle clatter of mugs, and the occasional laughter from customers created a sense of familiarity and comfort. But today was different, because today, Emma Wright, his unexpected houseguest, and the woman who had walked into his life from the rain, was standing behind the counter, wearing an apron 2 sizes too big. She looked out of place, yet strangely fitting. At the same time, her auburn hair was tied into a loose ponytail, and she kept fidgeting with the sleeves of the oversized sweatshirt he had given her. She had the posture of someone who had never worked a service job before, but her expression was determined. Ben, standing next to her, arms crossed, sighed. This was a bad idea, he muttered. Emma arched an eyebrow. You're the one who suggested I work here. I was being practical, Ben countered. Didn't think you'd actually say yes, she smirked, a rare glint of amusement in her tired eyes. Guess you underestimated me. Ben wasn't so sure. He had a feeling there was a lot about Emma that he hadn't begun to uncover yet. The cafe had its usual flow of customers, retirees chatting about their gardens, young couples stopping in for a quick breakfast, and the local book club claiming their usual corner table. Emma observed it all with quiet curiosity, her fingers absent-mindedly smoothing the front of her apron. Ben nudged her gently. All right, let's see what you can do. Take an order. Emma shot him a skeptical look. I don't even know how to use the register, Ben smirked. It's not quantum physics. She rolled her eyes but turned toward the next customer, a sweet elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had been coming here since Ben first opened the cafe. Emma picked up the notepad and cleared her throat, clearly nervous. Hi. What can I get you? Mrs. Patterson smiled kindly, her blue eyes twinkling. Well, dear, I usually get a cappuccino, but only if it's made with love. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Then, to Ben's surprise, she smiled. Genuinely this time. I think I can manage that, she said, scribbling the order. Ben watched her carefully. For the first time since she walked into his life, Emma looked at ease. By mid-morning, Emma had taken several orders without too much trouble. There were a few hiccups, like when she accidentally wrote chocolate disaster instead of chocolate croissant. But overall, she handled herself better than expected. Ben leaned against the counter, watching as she handed a latte to a young mother balancing a baby on her hip. You're not bad at this, he admitted. Emma gave him a sideways glance. High praise from the guy who doubted me an hour ago. Ben shrugged. I have high standards. Emma smirked. So do I. He found himself liking that about her. The way she wasn't intimidated by him. The way she held her own despite clearly being out of her element. There was a strength in her, hidden beneath the layers of whatever past she was running from. At lunchtime, an elderly man named Frank Hudson walked in. Frank was a regular, a retired war veteran who lived alone and never missed his daily turkey sandwich and black coffee. Ben was about to take his order when Emma stepped forward first. Hi, Mr. Hudson, she said, surprising both Ben and the old man. The usual? Frank blinked, taken aback. You remembered? Emma smiled. Of course. Ben watched as Frank's weathered features softened. It wasn't often that people outside the regular staff remembered the small details of his life. Emma disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later, carrying not just the sandwich and coffee, but also a small plate of homemade cookies. On the house, she said, setting them in front of him. Frank stared at the cookies, then at Emma, his eyes glassy with unexpected emotion. No one's done something like this for me in a long time, he murmured. Emma's smile wavered slightly, as if she understood that feeling too well. Ben watched the exchange in silence. He had been right about her. She wasn't just hiding from something, she was searching for something, too. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to find it here. By the time the afternoon rush slowed, Emma was wiping down a table when the bell above the door jingled again. Ben looked up, but instead of a familiar face, he saw a stranger in a dark coat standing just inside the doorway, scanning the room. Emma froze mid-motion, her back suddenly rigid. Ben's instincts kicked in immediately. The man's eyes landed on Emma, narrowing slightly. Ben didn't like that look. The man pulled out a sleek black phone, tapped the screen, and then he left. Emma exhaled shakily, setting down the rag with trembling fingers. Ben was already moving. He caught her by the wrist gently, but firmly enough to make her look up at him. That guy, he said quietly. You knew him, didn't you? Emma swallowed hard. I don't know. Ben's eyes darkened. Another lie. And now he had even more reason to not let her go. That night, after closing up the cafe, Ben found Emma sitting at the small kitchen table in his upstairs apartment, staring at a cup of untouched tea. She looked up as he leaned against the counter. You don't have to tell me everything, he said. But if someone's looking for you, I need to know what we're dealing with. Emma hesitated. Then, finally, he wasn't with Carter, she admitted. But he's looking for me. I could see it in his face. Ben studied her carefully. Emma let out a breath. I don't want to drag you into this, Ben. You already did, he said evenly. She met his gaze, and for once, she didn't look away. Ben exhaled, shaking his head. All right. If you're staying, we're setting some ground rules. Emma tilted her head. Rules? 1. You don't go anywhere alone. 2. You tell me if anything feels off. And 3. He paused, his gaze steady. You don't run again. Emma's lips parted slightly in surprise, but then for the first time she nodded. The night in Springwood was quiet, too quiet. Ben Carter leaned against the railing of the small balcony outside his upstairs apartment, his coffee growing cold in his hands. His mind wasn't at peace. He had spent years putting out literal fires, but this one was different. Emma Wright was a woman on the run, and now it wasn't just Carter, the man in the suit, who was looking for her. Someone else was in town, watching, waiting. Ben exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He should have told her to leave. Instead, he'd done the exact opposite. What the hell was he thinking? Inside, Emma sat at the kitchen table, tracing her fingers along the rim of her teacup. The glow from the small pendant light above her cast long shadows on the walls. Ben watched her carefully, his arms crossed over his chest. You're not sleeping, he said, breaking the silence. Emma huffed a quiet, humorless laugh. Neither are you. Ben leaned against the counter, studying her. She looked exhausted, but beneath the fatigue, there was something else. A quiet resilience. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't a damsel waiting to be saved, but she was tired of running. Who was he? Ben asked finally. Emma swallowed, setting, her cup down carefully. I don't know, she admitted. But he wasn't random. He was looking for me. Ben's jaw tightened. He already knew that. He just needed to hear her say it. Emma, he said evenly. I need the truth. She hesitated, her fingers curling into a fist on the table. Then, softly, almost too soft to hear, my father sent him. Ben stilled. That wasn't the answer he was expecting. Emma let out a slow breath, staring at a spot on the table, as if she could see her past playing out before her. My father, she began, is Charles Wright. Ben raised an eyebrow. The name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Charles Wright, CEO of Wright Industries, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. Ben let out a low whistle. Damn. Emma exhaled. Yeah, that about sums it up. Ben rubbed his jaw. So you're not just a rich girl, you're a billionaire's daughter. Emma finished for him, her voice flat. Yes. Ben stared at her for a moment, then shook his head. Figures. Emma frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Ben smirked. Explains why you looked like a lost puppy trying to work the register today. To his surprise, Emma laughed. An actual, real laugh. It was soft and unexpected, and for the first time since she walked into his life, she looked lighter. Just for a moment. Emma ran a hand through her hair. My father controls everything. His name opens doors, but it also closes them. Ben nodded, letting her continue. For years, I did everything right. I went to the right schools, made the right connections, played the part of the perfect daughter. She swallowed. And then he decided it was time for me to get married. Ben's expression darkened. To Carter, he guessed. Emma nodded, her lips pressing together. It was never about love. It was about merging two empires, creating the perfect power couple. She shook her head. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't. Just sign my life away like that. Ben studied her for a long moment. So you ran. Emma met his gaze. I ran, and just like that, everything clicked into place. She wasn't just escaping a relationship. She was escaping a dynasty. Ben let out a slow breath. All right, he said finally. So your father sent someone to find you. What happens when they do? Emma's hands curled into fists in her lap. They'll drag me back. Ben's eyes hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. Emma's gaze snapped up to meet his. Ben, you can't. Yes, I can. His voice was firm. You're not alone in this, Emma. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, her mask cracked, because no one had ever said that to her before. Ben exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, here's what we're gonna do. Emma blinked. We? Ben ignored that. You'll stay here. Keep working at the cafe like normal. Act like nothing's wrong. Emma frowned. And what about you? I'll keep an eye out, he said simply. If anyone else shows up looking for you, we'll deal with it. Emma shook her head immediately. Ben, I can't let you get involved in this. Too late, he said. I already am. She stared at him, searching for something in his face. But all she found was determination, and for some reason that scared her more than anything else. Outside, the town of Springwood slept peacefully. But somewhere out there, someone was looking. For her. And this time, Ben wouldn't let them take her without a fight. The morning sun spilled over Springwood, painting the streets in hues of soft gold. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the cafe as Emma moved behind the counter, focusing on something simple. The act of making a cappuccino. It was a distraction, a temporary escape. She had woken up restless, the weight of last night's conversation with Ben still pressing on her chest. For the first time since she ran, someone knew the truth. And instead of turning away, he stayed. But how long would that last? Emma knew better than to believe in permanence. All right, let's see what you've got. Emma turned to find Ben leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching her attempt at making a cappuccino with thinly veiled amusement. She raised an eyebrow. You supervising me now? Ben smirked. More like protecting my customers. Emma rolled her eyes but fought back a smile. It was easier like this. Banter, sarcasm, something that didn't feel like survival. She finished the cappuccino and slid it toward him. Try it. Ben picked up the cup, took a slow sip, and paused. Emma narrowed her eyes. Too much foam? Ben set the cup down and pretended to consider. Not bad. She crossed her arms. Not bad? Ben shrugged. For someone who used to drink lattes made by private baristas, it's impressive. Emma sighed dramatically. One compliment, just one. Is that so hard? Ben chuckled and pushed the cup back toward her. Fine, it's good. Emma hid her smile behind the rim of her own coffee cup. It was a small moment, but small moments mattered because for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to normal. The cafe had settled into its usual rhythm. Regulars took their usual seats. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and for a few brief hours, life was simple. Ben had disappeared into the back to check on inventory, leaving Emma alone at the counter when Frank Hudson, the elderly veteran from the day before, walked in. Emma's face lit up. Back again? Frank grinned. Told you I'd be. You don't forget an old man's order. You earn a customer for life. Emma smirked. Turkey sandwich and black coffee? Frank laughed. See? You're a natural. Emma poured his coffee and brought his food to his usual spot, but instead of eating, Frank studied her for a moment. You remind me of my daughter, he said, voice softer than usual. Emma blinked. Oh? Frank nodded. She was always running, too. Something in Emma's chest tightened. Running? Frank sighed, stirring his coffee absently. Never could sit still. Always looking for the next place, the next thing. Thought if she kept moving, she'd figure out who she was. He met Emma's gaze. But sometimes you don't find yourself by running. Sometimes you find yourself when you stop. Emma swallowed. She didn't know how to respond to that. Frank smiled, knowingly. Something to think about, kid. And just like that, he returned to his meal, as if he hadn't just unraveled her entire existence in 2 sentences. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Emma focused on keeping her hands busy, but her mind kept circling back. Frank's words. Ben's unwavering presence. The truth that still loomed over her. Her father's reach. The men looking for her. The inevitability of being found. She should leave. She should run again before it was too late. But when she glanced at Ben, leaning against the counter, flipping through the inventory list, she hesitated. She had never had this before, not just safety, but belonging. And the thought of losing it hurt more than she expected. That night, after closing up the cafe, Ben found Emma sitting outside on the steps, staring at the darkened street. She looked lost in thought, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth of the summer night. Ben stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Couldn't sleep? Emma exhaled a quiet laugh. Do I ever? Ben handed her a mug and sat beside her. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared understanding that didn't require words. After a moment, Emma spoke. Frank said something today. Ben raised an eyebrow. That old man's full of wisdom. Emma smirked slightly. He said I remind him of his daughter, that she was always running, and that sometimes you don't find yourself by running. Sometimes you find yourself when you stop. Ben was silent for a long moment, then softly. He's right. Emma turned to him. You think I should stay? Ben met her gaze, steady and sure. I think you should do whatever you need to, but I also think you don't have to run alone anymore. Emma swallowed hard, looking away, because that scared her more than anything. The idea that she didn't have to be alone. The idea that maybe, just maybe, she could stop. Just as the moment settled, a sudden noise shattered the quiet. A loud crash from inside the cafe. Ben was On his feet instantly, coffee forgotten as he threw open the door. The cafe was dark, but the front window was smashed inward. Glass scattered across the floor. Emma's breath hitched as she stepped inside, heart pounding. Ben reached for the bat he kept under the counter, muscles coiled with tension. And then, the note. A single piece of paper fluttering near the broken glass. Ben picked it up, his jaw tightening as he read the words scrawled in thick, deliberate handwriting. "You can't hide forever." Emma went completely still. Ben exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the note. And for the first time since this all began, he felt real fear. Because this wasn't a coincidence. This was a message. And whoever left it was just getting started. The cafe was silent, except for the faint sound of broken glass crunching under Ben's boots. The dim glow of the street lamp outside cast eerie shadows across the counter and tables, turning the familiar space into something unrecognizable. Something violated. Ben's fingers tightened around the bat in his hand, his heartbeat steady but his mind racing. Emma stood beside him, frozen, her breathing shallow. The note lay between them on the counter, its words stark against the pale paper. "You can't hide forever." Ben glanced at her. Her face was pale, her hands clenched at her sides. She wasn't just scared, she was terrified. And Ben hated that. He hated that someone, some coward, had taken this place, this moment of peace she had started to build, and turned it into a threat. Ben exhaled slowly, forcing his own anger down. Think clearly. React smart. He pulled out his phone and dialed. The call was picked up on the second ring. Sheriff Dawson speaking. "Dawson, it's Ben. I need you at the cafe." Now. A pause. Then, "What happened?" "Someone broke in?" Ben's eyes flicked to Emma. "And they left a message. I'm on my way." Ben ended the call and set the phone down. Emma hadn't moved. He took a step closer, speaking low and calm. "Emma?" She blinked, snapping out of her trance. Her gaze met his, wild with barely contained panic. "They found me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ben shook his head. "No, someone wants you to think they did." She swallowed. "Ben, you're still here," he said firmly. "That means you still have choices." Emma let out a shaky breath but didn't respond. She wasn't convinced. Not yet. 15 minutes later, Sheriff Tom Dawson pulled up outside in his patrol car. He was a solid man in his late 50s, with the kind of presence that made people think twice before crossing him. He stepped inside, surveying the damage, with a practiced eye. "Well," he said after a long moment, "someone wanted to make a statement." Ben nodded. "They didn't take anything. Just broke the window and left that." He gestured toward the note. Dawson picked it up, his expression hardening as he read. He turned to Emma. "You recognize the handwriting?" Emma hesitated. "No. Think. It was Carter?" Emma bit her lip. "Maybe, but—" She shook her head. "I don't know." Dawson exhaled sharply. "All right, I'll file a report, but if this is tied to whoever you're running from, you need to decide how you want to handle it." Emma's fists clenched. "I already made that decision. I'm not going back." Dawson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then we need to assume this isn't the last time something like this will happen." Ben's jaw tightened. That was exactly what he was thinking. After Dawson finished taking their statements and left, Ben locked the door behind him and turned back to Emma. "Come on," he said. "You're staying upstairs tonight." Emma looked up at him, surprised. Ben, I don't—" "You're not sleeping alone after this," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Not happening." Emma hesitated, then gave a small nod. The upstairs apartment was small, but safe. Emma sat on the edge of the couch, hugging a warm cup of tea that Ben had made. The air between them was heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Ben leaned against the counter and folded his arms. We need a plan. Emma looked up. A plan? You're not running, he said. That means we need to figure out what happens next. Emma let out a humorless laugh. What happens next? Ben, I've spent my whole life following someone else's plan. I have no idea what comes next. Ben exhaled through his nose. Then let's start simple. He pulled out a piece of paper and set it on the table in front of her. Emma frowned. What's this? Ben slid a pen toward her. You write down what you want, he said simply. Not what your father wants, not what Carter wants, what you want. Emma stared at the blank page, and for the first time she realized she had no idea how to answer that. Ben sat across from her, watching as she tapped the pen against the table. After a long silence, she finally sighed. You really think writing a list is going to fix my life? Ben smirked. No, but it's a start. Emma chewed on her lip. Then, finally, hesitantly, she wrote something down. Ben leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse. What's the first thing on your list? Emma covered the paper with her hand. Not telling, Ben chuckled. Fine, keep your secrets. She rolled her eyes, but she looked lighter. And that? That was progress. It was late. The night stretched on. The storm outside long gone, but the tension inside the apartment remained. Ben leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. Emma, sitting across from him, was watching him, really watching. And for the first time, Ben felt something shift between them. Something dangerous. Something that wasn't just concern or protection or kindness. Something deeper. Emma's gaze flickered to his mouth, just for a second. Ben swallowed. Hell, he should look away. He should shut this down. Instead, he found himself saying, Emma? She cut him off. Thank you. Ben blinked. For what? Emma hesitated. For this. For not treating me like I'm broken. Ben's throat tightened, because maybe she was broken. But so was he, and yet, here they were. He exhaled slowly. Get some sleep, Emma. She nodded. But even as she turned toward the spare room, she hesitated at the door, looking back at him. And Ben? He knew this was a line they couldn't cross. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But God help him. He wanted to. Emma woke up feeling lighter, until she saw the envelope slid under the door. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She bent down, picked it up with shaking fingers, and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A picture of her, working, behind the counter at the cafe, taken from outside. Emma's breath caught. Someone had been watching. Emma's fingers trembled as she stared at the photograph. It wasn't grainy or blurred. It wasn't an accident or a casual snapshot. It was deliberate, a perfectly framed image of her behind the cafe counter serving a customer. A moment of normalcy turned into a warning. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The air felt heavier, pressing against her chest as her mind raced. Someone had been watching. Someone had been close. She barely registered the sound of footsteps until Ben's voice cut through the silence. Emma? She turned sharply, the photograph still clutched in her hand. Ben's expression shifted the moment he saw her face. She didn't have to say anything. He already knew. Wordlessly, she handed him the photo. Ben's jaw tightened as he studied it, his grip firm but steady. His eyes darkened with something dangerous, something protective. Then he looked up at her. When did you find this? His voice was calm, but she could hear the edge beneath it. It was under the door. Her voice was quieter than she intended. Ben inhaled sharply, then ran a hand through his hair, his movements controlled, but barely. Emma watched as he took one step back, then another, his shoulders tense. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the front door. Ben! But he was already outside. Ben's hands curled into tight fists as he scanned the quiet street. Nothing. No unfamiliar cars. No shadows lurking in the alley. No sign of the bastard who thought it was a good idea to stalk Emma. His blood boiled. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was personal. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Rage wouldn't solve this. He needed to think. To stay ahead. Because whoever had left that photograph, they weren't finished. When Ben stepped back inside, Emma was still standing in the same spot, arms wrapped around herself, her expression unreadable. But he knew better. She wasn't just scared. She was exhausted. Exhausted from running, hiding, waiting for the next strike. Ben exhaled and set the photograph down on the table between them. "You need to tell me everything," he said, his voice low but firm. "Now," Emma hesitated. "Ben, No more holding back," he cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Who do you think did this?" She swallowed hard. "If it's not Carter, then it has to be someone working for my father." Ben's stomach twisted. Charles Wright, powerful, controlling. The kind of man who didn't ask for things. He took them. And Emma? She was his unfinished business. Ben leaned forward, bracing his hands against the counter. "Then we need to assume this isn't over." Emma let out a slow breath. It was never over. Ben studied her carefully. For all her fear, she wasn't broken. She had been fighting this battle alone for too long. And now? Now she didn't have to. Ben straightened. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Emma blinked. "We?" Ben's expression was unwavering. "Yeah, we. You're not alone in this, Emma." She looked away, like she didn't quite believe him, but he meant every damn word. By the time Sheriff Dawson arrived, Emma had pulled herself together. She sat across from Ben in the back of the cafe, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Not because she wanted it, but because she needed something to ground herself. Dawson took one look at the photograph and let out a low whistle. "Someone's getting bolder," he muttered. Ben didn't react. If he did, he might break something. "What can we do?" Emma asked. Dawson exhaled. "I'll patrol more frequently. I'll also talk to some people. See if anyone noticed something off." He looked at Ben. "And you, keep an eye on her." Ben's jaw tightened. "Already planned on it." Dawson nodded, slipping the photograph into a file. "I'll be in touch." Then he left, leaving just the two of them. Emma let out a breath. "This is getting worse." Ben's expression hardened. "Then we get ready for worse." Emma met his gaze, something unreadable in her eyes, then softly, "You're not scared of them, are you?" Ben's smirk was slow, deliberate. "I don't scare easy." Emma huffed out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "Of course you don't." That night, Ben barely slept. Every noise outside made him sit up. Every shadow felt like a threat. And Emma? She was just down the hall, close, but not close enough. At some point in the early hours, he heard the soft creak of her door opening. He turned his head just in time to see her standing there, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. She didn't speak, didn't move. Just stood there uncertain, hesitant. Finally, she whispered, "I can't sleep." Ben exhaled slowly. He didn't say anything. He just patted the empty spot on the couch beside him. Emma hesitated for only a second before stepping forward, curling up at the other end of the couch, her knees tucked under her chin. Ben tossed a blanket over her, then leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't much, but for now, it was enough. The next morning, just as the town was waking up, Ben's phone buzzed. A message from a number he didn't recognize. Ben frowned, unlocking the screen. The message was short. Too short, but it made his blood run cold. "She belongs to him." Ben's grip tightened around the phone. "Not on my damn watch." The moment Ben read the message, his pulse slowed. Not out of fear, but out of calculation. She belongs to him. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. This was a claim. A statement meant to remind him who held the power, or at least who thought they did. Ben had dealt with men like that before. The ones who believed control was a birthright, who thought money could erase choices and bend wills. He clenched his jaw. If they wanted to fight, they'd find out he wasn't the kind of man who backed down. Ben deleted the message before Emma could see it. She was already carrying enough fear. He wouldn't add to it. By the time he made it downstairs, Emma was already in the cafe, pretending like everything was normal. Ben saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she smiled at customers, but never truly relaxed. She was trying, and he hated that she had to. "Morning," he said, grabbing a coffee. Emma glanced at him. "You look tired." Ben smirked. "You're one to talk." Emma rolled her eyes, but it lacked real fire. She was distracted. "Did you sleep?" Ben asked. Emma hesitated, then shrugged. "A little." Ben studied her, debating whether to tell her about the message, but before he could decide, the bell above the door chimed, and every muscle in Emma's body went rigid. Ben turned. A man in an expensive suit stepped inside. He wasn't Carter, but he had the same polished arrogance, the same quiet confidence that came from money and power. He took one sweeping glance around the cafe, then locked eyes with Emma, and smiled. "Emma," he said smoothly. "It's been a long time." Emma's hand tightened around the coffee pot she was holding. "Elliot," she said, her voice even, but Ben could hear the strain beneath it. Ben didn't know who the hell Elliot was, but he already didn't like him. The man took a casual step forward. "Your father is worried about you." Emma's breath hitched. "I doubt that." Elliot sighed, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher addressing a reckless student. "You know this won't last," he said, gesturing around the cafe. "Playing waitress in a nowhere town? That's not who you are." Emma's jaw clenched. "You don't get to tell me who I am." Ben set his coffee down and stepped closer. "I don't know who you are," he said evenly. "But you should leave." Elliot barely spared him a glance. "I'm having a conversation with Emma." Ben's muscles tensed. "No, you're trying to intimidate her." Elliot finally turned to look at him fully, as if just now acknowledging his existence. "And you are?" Ben smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "The man standing between you and the door." Elliot's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, maybe even a hint of surprise, before his smile returned, cool and confident. "I see." Ben didn't move, didn't blink, didn't back down. Elliot exhaled. "I'll go, for now." He looked back at Emma. "But you know how this works, don't you? He won't stop until you come home." Emma said nothing. Elliot's smile sharpened. "Enjoy your coffee." Then he turned and walked out. The door shut behind him. Emma released a breath she had been holding the entire time. Ben watched her carefully. She was standing too still, like if she moved, the whole world would crash around her. He took a slow step forward. "Emma," she inhaled sharply. "I'm fine." Ben arched an eyebrow. "No, you're not." She let out a bitter laugh. "Observant." Ben waited, giving her space to say whatever she needed. Finally, she sighed. "Elliot is my father's right-hand man. He does the things my father doesn't want his name attached to." Ben's stomach tightened. "Like dragging you back." Emma nodded. Ben ran a hand over his jaw. "You think Carter sent him?" Emma hesitated. "No. If Carter had sent him, he would have forced me out of here." Ben frowned. "So this was just a warning." Emma exhaled. "This was him telling me my time is running out." Ben's jaw clenched. Like hell it was. The cafe closed early that night. Ben locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and stood at the entrance, watching the dark street like it might try to swallow them whole. Behind him, Emma sat at the counter, staring at her untouched tea. Ben. He turned. She took a deep breath. I can't keep dragging you into this. Ben leaned against the counter. You didn't drag me into anything. Emma met his gaze. You should tell me to leave. Ben tilted his head. You want to leave? Emma didn't answer, and that silence was all the answer he needed. Ben stepped closer. Then you stay. Emma swallowed. Ben, if you keep helping me, your father doesn't scare me. Emma exhaled shakily. Then you don't know him. Ben's jaw tightened. Maybe, but I do know you. Emma's breath caught, and for a moment it was just them. The quiet between words, the weight of everything unspoken. Then Ben did something reckless. He reached out and took her hand. Emma stiffened. Not because she didn't want it, but because she did. Slowly, carefully, her fingers curled around his. Ben didn't move, didn't push, just stayed. And for the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel like she was falling. She felt held. That night, as Ben lay awake on the couch, his mind ran through a dozen scenarios. A dozen ways this could end badly. His phone buzzed. Another message. Ben frowned, sitting up as he checked the screen. One word. Tomorrow. Ben's blood turned cold. Whoever this was, they weren't done waiting. They were coming. And this time? They weren't just leaving a message. The moment Ben read the message, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Tomorrow. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a promise. Whoever sent it wasn't going to wait in the shadows any longer. They were coming. And they were coming. Soon? Ben set his phone down, exhaling slowly. His fingers curled into fists as he stared at the dark ceiling. He had spent years fighting fires, rescuing people from situations they never should have been in. But this was personal. The cafe usually woke with the town. Gradual, unhurried, safe. But that morning, everything felt different. Ben was up before dawn, checking the locks, scanning the street outside. Emma found him at the counter, his coffee untouched, eyes unreadable. She didn't ask if something was wrong. She already knew. They're coming, aren't they? She asked softly. Ben met her gaze. Yeah. Emma swallowed, gripping the edge of the counter. Then maybe I should go. Ben's temper flared instantly. No, Ben. No, he repeated, firmer this time. You don't get to run anymore. Not from them. Not from this. Emma's shoulders tensed. And what happens when they walk in here? When they see you standing in their way? Ben smirked, but there was no humor in it. Then I guess we see who walks out. Emma's breath caught. You can't fight them alone. Ben stepped closer, voice low and steady. I don't plan to. Emma frowned. Then what? The bell above the door chimed. Both of them froze. Ben turned instinctively, his body shifting to place himself between Emma and whoever had just walked in. But it wasn't Carter. It wasn't Elliot. It was Sheriff Dawson. The sheriff's gaze flickered between them, his expression unreadable. Morning, he said simply. Ben exhaled, tension easing slightly. Dawson. Dawson stepped forward, setting his hands on the counter. Had a feeling you'd be up early. Ben arched an eyebrow. You here for coffee or trouble? Dawson sighed. Both. Emma stayed silent, watching them carefully. I heard about Elliot, Dawson said. And now there's a rumor floating around that some of Wright's men are coming through town. Ben's jaw tightened. Dawson exhaled. I can't stop them from coming. But I can be here when they do. Emma stiffened. You're offering to help? Dawson gave her a long, measured look. Emma, your father may own half the city, but he doesn't own this town. And he sure as hell doesn't own you. Emma swallowed hard. She wasn't used to people standing up for her. Ben smirked. Guess we've got ourselves a sheriff after all. Dawson shook his head. I'll be outside when they get here. Then he turned to Emma. If you change your mind, if you decide you want to press charges, make this official. I'll back you. Emma hesitated. You don't have to decide now, Dawson said. Just know you have options. Then he turned and walked back outside, leaving them in silence. They didn't have to wait long. By noon the black cars appeared, sleek and polished, cutting through the quiet streets of Springwood like a warning bell. Ben was already at the counter, his stance steady, unshaken, while Dawson leaned against his patrol car outside, watching. Emma stood behind Ben, her hands curled into fists, breath shallow. The doors to the first car opened, and Elliot stepped out first. Then came Carter. And finally, Charles Wright. Emma inhaled sharply. She hadn't expected him to come, but there he was, tall, powerful, commanding the space like he owned it, which, in his mind, he probably did. Ben didn't move, didn't blink, but he could feel Emma trembling behind him. Charles stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the cafe with quiet disdain. Then his eyes landed on Emma, and he smiled. "Emma," he said smoothly, "let's go home." Emma's voice came out stronger than she expected. "No," Charles exhaled, shaking his head. "You've had your rebellion. You've had your fun. But this ends today." Emma didn't flinch. "It ends when I say it does." For the first time, something in Charles's expression shifted. Just slightly. "You don't get to make that choice," Ben finally spoke. "The hell she doesn't." Charles turned to him like noticing an insect on his sleeve. "Ah, you must be the local hero," Ben smirked. "Something like that," Charles exhaled, as if bored already. "This doesn't concern you." Ben's eyes darkened. "Emma concerns me." A beat of silence. Emma looked at Ben sharply, her breath catching. Charles let out a slow, calculating smile. "So that's how it is." Ben's jaw ticked. "Yeah, that's how it is." Charles sighed, turning back to Emma. "You don't belong here." Emma's heart pounded. But this time, she wasn't afraid. "You're right," she said softly. "I don't belong here." Charles's expression shifted into satisfaction, until she finished. "But I don't belong with you either." A flicker of something dangerous crossed his face. "You'll regret this." Emma stood taller. "I already regret waiting this long." Ben felt something in his chest tighten. Something like pride. Charles sighed heavily, then nodded toward Carter and Elliot. "Let's go." Just like that, they turned and walked out, but not before Carter paused at the doorway, his gaze locking onto Ben's. "This isn't over," he murmured. Ben smiled coldly. "I hope not." Then the men were gone, and just like that, Emma was free. The cafe was silent. Emma's hands were still shaking, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Relief. Ben turned to her, watching her carefully. "You okay?" Emma exhaled, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Ben hesitated. Then, without thinking, he reached for her hand. Emma let him. They didn't say anything, because, for once, words weren't necessary. The cafe felt different after they left. Not physically. The walls still stood, the coffee still brewed, and the town still moved at its slow, unhurried pace. But to Emma, everything had changed. For the first time in her life, she had stood her ground. Not because someone gave her permission, not because it was expected of her, but because she chose it. She had spent so long believing her life wasn't hers to control, that no matter where she went or how far she ran, her father's shadow would always find her. But today she had proven herself wrong. And Ben, he had stood beside her without hesitation, without doubt. And that meant more than she could ever put into words. Ben found her sitting on the back steps of the cafe, a warm cup of coffee in her hands, watching the sunrise. He leaned against the doorframe, studying her for a moment. "You're still here," he said finally. Emma looked up, her expression unreadable. "I am." Ben stepped forward, sitting beside her. "You still thinking about leaving?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "I don't know." Ben nodded, as if he had expected that. "Fair answer." Emma sighed, wrapping her hands tighter around her mug. "I've never stayed anywhere for long, Ben. I don't even know what it feels like to stop moving." Ben tilted his head. "You think staying means stopping?" Emma hesitated. "Isn't it?" Ben shook his head. "No. Sometimes staying is the bravest thing you can do." Emma let out a small laugh. "You always this wise?" Ben smirked. "Only before I've had coffee." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. And for a moment it was just them. The quiet, the warmth of the rising sun, the unspoken words hanging between them. 2 days passed. No calls, no threats, no shadows lurking outside. For the first time, in a long time, Emma felt safe. And that safety terrified her. She had spent years running, expecting the worst, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Could she even exist in a life that wasn't built on escape? Could she belong here? She didn't know. But she wanted to find out. That evening, after the cafe closed, Emma found Ben fixing a loose chair leg at one of the tables, sleeves rolled up, focus unwavering. She hesitated in the doorway. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she spoke. "I think I want to stay." Ben froze mid-movement. Slowly he looked up at her, eyes searching hers, as if trying to figure out if she was saying it because she meant it or because she thought he wanted to hear it. "You sure?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Ben set down the screwdriver, standing up fully. "All right." Emma blinked. "That's it?" Ben smirked. "You were expecting a parade." Emma huffed out a small laugh. "No, but I don't know. I thought you'd at least make a sarcastic comment." Ben stepped closer, his expression soft but steady. "Emma, you choosing to stay is yours to decide. I'm not going to convince you or talk you into it." Emma swallowed. "You don't have to." Ben's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back up to her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. She took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. Ben. His name was a whisper, a question, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Ben reached up, brushing a stray piece of hair from her face. "Yeah?" Emma took a breath, steadying herself. "I'm done running." Ben's throat worked around an emotion he didn't name. Then, finally, he closed the distance and kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was steady, grounding, sure, just like him. And Emma? For the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Springwood Cafe was busier than ever. Emma moved behind the counter like she had been doing it her whole life, effortlessly balancing plates, calling out orders, smiling more than she ever thought possible. Ben stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers as he passed her a coffee mug. It was subtle, but it was them. No grand declarations, no dramatic moments, just quiet, everyday love, the kind that stayed, the kind that built a home. And as Emma glanced at the small town she had once planned to leave behind, she realized she had found something she never thought she would. Not just safety, not just freedom, but a future she wanted to stay for. Wow, what a journey! Ben and Emma's story is a testament to how love, kindness, and the courage to stand up for yourself can change everything. Now, I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? What was your favorite moment in this story? Have you ever had a moment in life where you had to choose between running and staying? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps. And if you want more heartwarming, inspiring stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Your support means the world. See you in the next story.